Hello and welcome to Future Procurement Podcast. My name is Robert Freeman and we want to continue with the new format of our Future Procurement Podcast, and we continue having the guests from the field of procurement, purchasing and supply chain management and share their big ideas and experience. We are already quite big audience. We are 10,000 plus people. Actually, I was checking this morning, we were more than 13,000 people from so many countries all around the world. And now I really feel that we can make a great positive impact to the world around us. So to continue with our podcast, today we have the very special guest, very interesting guest from France. His name is Rémy de Lavergne. I hope I have said it right, Rémy.
That's correct.
That's correct.
That's perfect.
Warmly welcome to our show, Rémy.
Thank you.
Rémy is a purchasing manager working with transport, logistics, indirect purchasing mostly. And Rémy, I think it's fair enough if you will introduce yourself quickly.
Yes. So my name is Rémy de Lavergne. I'm purchasing manager in France, as you said, and I have around 20 years experience in procurement. And in my life, I've bought different kind of products or services, foods, overheads, and recently transportation and logistics. And I have experience in different industries, such as retail, health, automobile, oil, and defense. And I had the chance to work in different types of companies, public, private, small, medium, and bigs. So I have a large view of procurement and management in different types of situations. I experienced French, American, Spanish, and Italian companies. So I had also an international views of different types of ways of buying and managing.
Yeah, it's really broad experience. So this
Yes.
is the type of people I really like to have in our podcast, who have so broad experience and can. I really see that Rémy, with your experience and with your great ideas, which we will talk just now, it will be super interesting episode, and I'm already jealous to our listeners now. Okay, so Rémy, can you tell about your ideas or this big idea you want to share today based on your experience you have had?
So the idea today is that I was wondering for a very long time how we can define what is a buyer, what a buyer does. And I just puzzled out many ideas. And the two main ideas I found is a buyer is a value maker for clients. He creates value for clients, both internal clients and external clients, so final clients. And on another hand, he is a cost reducer.
So there are two main functions that you have seen for professional.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So according to what the buyer really does in terms of cost reduction and value creation for clients, we can identify four types of buyers. The first one is a buyer who is not creating any value for clients and not reducing any cost. And I call this buyer a bureaucrat. And we see a lot of bureaucrats, a lot in public sector, in public administrations, and fewer in private companies.
What you have done in your classification, I will maybe jump a little bit in ahead.
Yes.
What you have done in your classification, you have evaluated how much value do people bring in their buying or procurement, purchasing experience, and how much cost reduction do they do, right?
That's
so you
yes.
say if they don't give any value to the company or internal and external customers, and if they don't reduce any costs, you call them bureaucrats. And this is the level 1.
Exactly.
The lowest possible. Okay.
That's what I call more precisely the buyer 1.0, the bureaucrat.
Buyer 1.0. We will attach the matrix you have made,
Yes.
where this theory and these names like buyer 1.0, the bureaucrat, and others, they will be on this matrix, right? So we will attach this to the podcast show notes. Please
Yes.
See the attachment, and maybe we will have a short article in the blog post where we will talk more about it in written also. So it's also a visual, nice visual matrix material.
Okay. The first type of buyer, the 1.0, is the bureaucrat, and then you have second generation of buyers which I call a cost killer.
Okay.
And this type of buyer is only reducing costs and is not looking for any creation of value for clients.
Okay, so buyer 2.0 is concentrating only on costs.
Exactly.
Right.
And then we have the 3.0 buyer that I call the innovator.
Right.
His strategy is to value innovation, to find innovation, to create the most value possible for clients.
Okay. Without taking care so much about the cost reduction.
Yes, because in some cases, the value creation for clients is more important than the cost reductions, especially in some specific business where the innovation, the technology is growing very, very, very quickly. Sometimes it's not the priority to reduce costs.
Exactly. And you will say later on the examples of activities that this can buyer do, and the industries or the sectors where these buyers can be also valuable. Probably it's
yes.
This is not the worst type of buyer, right?
Yes. And the more the higher level, the more complex level of buying is the 4.0 buyer, which I call the business developer. His strategy is to, at the same time, to innovate, like the innovator, and to reduce costs, like the cost killer. So he's doing both things at the same time. Value creation for clients and cost reduction.
That's very interesting. So these are the 4 types of buyers that you have classified and that you have put in this matrix, depending on their value creation abilities and on their cost reduction abilities.
Exactly.
And activities connected to how successful they are, connected to cost reduction and value creation. All right, that's very interesting. And you created this matrix by yourself, right?
Yes.
Did you give it any name?
Yes, I give it my name, my family name. So this matrix is called Lavergne Procurement Matrix.
Is it Lavergne or de Lavergne?
My official name is de Lavergne, but to make it simpler, I just put Lavergne Procurement Matrix. So it's LPM, Lavergne Procurement Matrix, to make it simple.
Okay. And once again, we will attach it to the show notes. And for our listeners, please check it on the show notes. It's really, really powerful matrix. And actually, the way, Rémy, I asked you to come to this podcast was when I have seen this matrix for procurement, I was really, really excited. And I said, yes, this person should be on my show. This is what we need to say to all our listeners. And I'm really excited. Rémy, thank you so much for finding time to come here and to explain a little bit more. So let's jump maybe one by one into the different types of the buyers. And if you can maybe in a little bit details to describe each type of buyer. So buyer 1.0, you said bureaucrat, creating no value and creating no cost reduction, right? So the
exactly.
very lowest level.
Exactly. But it's better than nothing, because before the buyer 1.0, there is no buyer. And no buyer, it's level 0.0. And it's worse. It is better to have a bureaucrat than no buyer at all.
I like it.
But that's true.
It's very good. So this is one positive side of having the buyer 1.0. It's much better than nothing, right?
Yeah.
Can you
exactly.
describe this person? What is this person doing, and how he performs, and how does he or she help to the entire company?
So this person, his strategy is very simply to supply.
Right.
He doesn't collaborate a lot with others. He works most of the time alone. He is quite static. He say most of the time in his office, not moving outside the office, not moving to other department. He stay times in his office doing bureaucratic works.
Okay.
He is quite passive, so he's not proactive. He's waiting for others to come to him to tell him to work on one subject or another.
I like it. Okay.
And he is, especially in France, but I imagine it's more or less the same outside of the world. These people who are much more concentrated in public sector, in administration, especially. And there is a special laws for buying in public sector in France. I imagine it's the same.
It's most of the countries. Yeah, exactly. So positions, especially in administration, in public sector, it is really, they are super afraid, or many people, majority I would say, are super afraid to make a mistake. And they are so much concentrating on the law that they are really taking no care about, like you said, cost reduction or value creation is kind of second and third priority. First thing is to make it according to the legislation, right?
Exactly. You perfectly define what I wanted to say. So it's exactly that. And so these people are quite conservative. They decide slowly, and they have no global vision of the business of the situation. They just see, I don't know if it's possible to say it in English, but in French you just see the end of your nose, and you not see any further. So and generally these people, they have no procurement education. They have, as you said, knowledge in laws. So very simply, that's one type of buyer. I hope this type of buyer is going to disappear one day. And
yeah, but as you said, it is still the place for such people when the procurement or purchasing or whatever buying department is only occurring. Probably this is a really, really basic level and the entry point for this kind of unfortunately, as you said, in the public sector, that's what I experienced myself. In the future procurement community, this is a really, really popular question, to concentrate a little bit more on how can we improve the public sector, how can we really make these standards that are existing in different countries. Mostly I work with, or the people who are asking these questions are coming from developing countries where it's extremely tough to be anyhow creative or to talk even about the cost reduction and things like that. So it is I fully understand this type of buyer, but as you say, this is a part of our life and this is what we have. This is what we don't want to have maybe, but this is reality. So buyer 1.0, bureaucrat.
Yes, I just have one idea to get the situation better in this case.
Okay.
I think for bureaucrat, one thing that could be possible is to separate very clearly who is a lawyer and who is a buyer, and to have two people, but each one working on his field. Because you can be a good lawyer, but it's very difficult to be a good lawyer and a good buyer. But I think that separating these two people and making them working together very closely, it can make good. We can have good results.
It's very practical advice. I like it very much. So if there is a possibility for you working in the public procurement or in the public sector, if there is a possibility to split the role into two, one is doing with purely legislation and law, and second is doing only with purchasing or buying or procurement activities. Very nice advice.
Yes,
thank you.
But they need to work together very closely, because if they work each one in his office, it's not good.
That's very practical advice. Let's move on to the buyer 2.0.
So the 2.0 is the cost killer. So it's a buyer His strategy is to reduce costs. That's it. He's just focused
So
on
he or she
reducing.
doesn't take care about the value creation or really add in some value to the entire company. Or how would you describe what are the activities that this person is doing and what are the activities that this person is not doing?
Yes. So this person is very strong for negotiation. He is very tough for negotiation with suppliers. He is very active. He is very used to benchmark with competitors, with suppliers, price and sales conditions, for example. He is very good for understanding global costs, like total cost of ownerships. Generally, he knows very well the suppliers' markets. He knows how to use new tools like e-auctions, that type of tools. And he is collective. He knows how to work in team. That's how I would describe this type of buyer. Sometimes you meet this type of buyer, sometimes in retail.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That I was working a long time in retail, and this I think is the type of the buyer which is very much appreciated in exactly like you said in retail when there is a fight for every like cent of savings and here and now you need to deliver these savings and the atmosphere that I remember, it was the second company where I was working. That was really crazy competition on the market. It was in Great Britain, and that time I had the idea that we're doing something wrong, or like long-term planning or this strategical thinking was completely absent in our procurement department. But we were so good in really negotiating in cost reduction and this action planning for cost reduction. And like you said, this RFQ, RFP was really big thing in the department. And that was, like you say, that was in retail. So I don't know, is it the best? Now I believe that it's not the best long-term strategy, but I think it's a big asset for the company, this kind of buyers, as you describe them, cost killers. Maybe, yes, as you said before, maybe in combination with the other types of people, as one of the team players, this could be really big asset, or?
Yes, give a personal idea about that. I think some companies in retail are cost killers, and others are a bit more intelligent, and some others are more like business developers. And I think some retail company has started to understand that maybe it would be better to be business developer than cost killer. I hope. Let's see. Let's see the future.
Okay. Before stepping into really business developer, what you said, the highest level of maturity of the buyer. Tell us more about the innovator, the person who is creating a lot of value but doesn't concentrate on the cost reduction, right?
Yes. This type of buyer is a very good networker. That is to say that he has different types of networks inside the company, outside the company. So it's someone very communicative, talks a lot to many people to get information, to exchange information, to find new ideas, new concept, to how to innovate, to do better. So it's someone quite pragmatic, creative, quick, let's say swift, diplomatic, and agile. So he has a lot of soft skills. He's quite proactive, collaborative. So it's in some certain way is quite similar to a salesman. And he has leadership qualities because he needs to see very different people to innovate because he has to pilot projects, and to pilot projects you need to internally in your company he needs to contact and to find an agreement with different types of people, from quality, from sales, from
Exactly.
human resources, from many departments. And so you need to have a leadership and to force changes to help new ideas to implement.
No, that's very interesting too. Not so much concentrating on cost, but still it's very, very dynamic, very, very creative in a way, like you said, and a big leadership.
Yes.
Abilities. All right.
And
so where do you think this kind of buyer is very useful? Maybe which industries or which segments, or how would you describe? Is there any big advantage to have this kind of person for some particular project? Maybe
mainly in companies where the technology is improving very, very, very quickly. Telecommunication, like cell phones, computers,
exactly.
the technology is going very, very, very quickly. And sometimes you have quite good margins. The best solution is to have the best technology possible, not always the best cost possible.
Exactly. I also thought about telecom or IT or these kind of things where the speed of development is super big, where the requirements to agility and to time to market and things like that are so big that I have recently posted in my blog when I was visiting the clients or the partners in Silicon Valley. I was writing in my blog about this phenomenon that I have seen, that people don't talk, the purchasing department, they were not talking about cost savings or something like this, because in normal organizations that work with, like you said, retail, manufacturing, these kind of things, we are mostly talk about like price development was comparing last year to this year. But for these kind of IT companies, they say, but we have nothing to compare to because last year we didn't buy these kind of things. And next year we will not buy the things we are buying today. So the speed is really, really important, and far more important than the cost. So I think that's very nice type of buyer for these segments, for these industries. The innovator, really nicely described.
The innovator. And just to precise a bit, and I think innovators are very useful in companies, as you said, with fast technology, and also in companies with big margin, when the purchasing cost is much lower, is a small percentage of the total cost of the service or of the product that will be sold. It's not the same than when the cost of the product you buy is 10% of the total cost. It's not the same than when it's 90%.
Exactly.
Because so when you have these two conditions, growing technology, fast technology, and big margins,
right.
Yes, I think innovator is quite adapted.
That's a very good point.
And last point I didn't specify about this type of buyer is that generally these buyers, they are quite open on the world and open on others. It's not the old generation of buyers. It's another planet, from a bureaucrat to an innovator. They do the same job, but they don't do the same job, in fact.
Exactly.
And
that's very interesting.
I would say that there are a lot of innovator buyers among the population below 30, 35 years old.
Exactly. This is how I imagine the person when you're describing this person. I imagine the guy in white t-shirt, somewhere from Silicon Valley,
Yeah, that's it.
That's very interesting. All right. And I like very much, Rémy, how you are describing also this with so bright colors, so you can immediately draw yourself the avatar of this buyer and or the person who could it be. Okay, very interesting. Let's move on to the business developer, to the most mature type of buyer according to your Lavergne classification.
Okay, so the business developer, his strategy is to do at the same time to innovate and to reduce costs. So he's doing what the innovator and the cost killer are doing, but both at the same time, which is quite difficult.
Yeah, which is quite difficult to keep in one person. Yeah.
Yes,
orientation
exactly.
To cost reduction and to really value creation. It takes maturity, and it takes experience also to get, probably, or.
So I would just simply define this buyer as a certain type of businessman, because it's someone that is really focused on cost and on clients, and he pilots projects. He goes very often on the field to meet people, to meet suppliers, to meet clients, to meet all people inside that are involved into the production of the service, or the creation, the production of the goods, or the creation of the service. Someone quite mobile, moving very quickly. Geographically and in his mind, he is able to move from one idea to another, from one subject to another. Someone who has a great capacity of communication. Someone strong for networking inside and outside the company. And someone proactive. He doesn't wait. He's anticipating a new solution, new possibilities. He's working a lot with others. He's quite collaborative. And one very important thing, you also need to have a very strong emotional intelligence.
All right.
I would say that emotional intelligence is the capacity to talk to very different people and to adapt to these people, to understand what they say and to be understood, to interact with them. Yeah. So in this type of job, maybe a buyer or purchasing manager will have to talk to very different people, maybe directly to a CEO, to human resources, to marketing, to workers, to many types of people. So each time you need to adapt to the type of communicator you have in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's very important in this kind of really mature level of buyer to have people around you who are together with you. I mean, you cannot do this on your own, as you describe in the level 1.0, when the person is sitting in his office and trying to just execute the orders or whatever. But I mean, in this type, you really want to think long term. You want to think win-win, and for this you really need a good communication, as you said, emotional, intelligent. Okay, very interesting. So you are more like concentrating on both, yes, value creation for internal, external clients and reduction of the costs. So it's really difficult, of course, to I wanted to say to balance, because it seems like you should choose either or, right? Should you create the value or you reduce the cost?
Exactly. I would say that this type of buyers, the business developers buyers, they are on maybe on companies like service companies in a very, very competitive environment. For example, it could be a car rental company. You have a lot of competitions, a lot of companies proposing these services, for example, like car companies, car rental companies. And you need to be very good for cost, and at the same time, you need to be very good for value creation for clients. because if you're not, you can be dead.
Exactly. I like this example, car rental. So service is with a big competition on the market.
Yes, exactly.
That's a nice example. And I really like also what you said in the very beginning. I don't know if everybody have mentioned this, but Rémy has started his description of the business developer is the person who is acting like a businessman. And
exactly.
I really remember now when you said it, it was somewhere in the middle of 2000s, maybe like 2005, 6. My manager at that time, CEO of the company, he came to me and said, Robert, the best advice I can give to you now when you are a manager of your department is to act or to lead your department not like you are my employee, but like it is your own company. And your internal customers are your real customers, and you should provide the best service to them with the best, with the capacities and with the people resources that you have in your disposal. And that really changed my approach to the way I was leading this this department, really, because when this mind shift happens, when you really start to think about your work or your department's work as your own business, then you start to care about both. I mean, value creation for the customers, as you described, to external customers or who will use the service or the product, or for internal customers who are the salesmen, for example. And at the same time, you should care about the cost, about the KPIs, and things like that. I think it's very nice. And the name you have chosen for this business developer, it's really, I think it's very to the point, create the value and reduces the cost at the same time.
Yes, just one simple information. You can use this matrix as a buyer, as a purchasing manager or CPO. You can use it as like a SWOT matrix. Put what you will do, your actions, and you try to qualify your actions, what they will generate. They will generate cost reduction, yes or no. They will generate value creation for clients, or both. And maybe you can just make a mapping, like a SWOT mapping, and to put on a visual page all your ideas, and try to put the more ideas you can in the business developer in the business development area.
That's very useful recommendation what you said. And as I said before, we will attach it to the show notes, so please, for our listeners, check it in the show notes. We have the link to this matrix itself, and if you would use it and apply for yourself and try to ask yourself the questions about each of the segments, and how can you move from type of buyer where you are now to the type of buyer where you want to be, ask yourself these questions that Rémy was referring to. Really useful advice, Rémy.
Yes,
I like it very much.
You can find this matrix on internet. You just go on Google, you type Lavergne Procurement Matrix, and you will find it. Or if not, you can go on my profile, on my LinkedIn profile, Rémy de Lavergne, and you will find this matrix.
Super. We will attach that to the show notes anyhow, so just one click and you will find it. And super. Finally, say that I think it's worth mentioning that this matrix is translated now, Rémy, to how many languages?
This matrix is available in English, French, and very soon it will be in Spanish.
Super. Thank you very much for this episode. It was really, really interesting and useful and practical to have this discussion with you, Rémy.
Thank you.
And I'm sure our listeners will like it. How did you like the discussion today, guys? I really enjoyed it. And not only because Rémy is so knowledgeable and so skilled professional, having more than 20 years of working with procurement, purchasing, or buying as he calls it, but Also, revealing new ways of classifying procurement professional based on their value and the cost savings was really interesting, and I'm sure that when you will check the procurement matrix made by Rémy de Lavergne, you will really like it and you will use it for your own professional development. And as a little teaser before the next week, I would announce that we will talk to Rémy de Lavergne once again, and we will discuss Lavergne Management Matrix. So if you are working as a manager today, or if you plan to become the manager in your department, being responsible for people and for a bigger part of your business, then this episode will be really interesting for you. My name is Robert Freeman, and this was Future Procurement. Talk to you soon. Oh, and one more thing. Please check our webpage, futureprocurement.net. We have added there a section called Coming Events. There we will announce the coming free webinars, which will help you to get the extra value for your career and your procurement organization. The places in the webinar will be limited, so please register for them already now.